Welcome back, everyone. My guests need no introduction. Highly requested. I'm so glad this is finally happening. It's been in the works for, I feel like, more than a year. Max and Stacy, welcome to the show together. Max was one of my first podcast guests when I first started Coin Stories, but it's great to have you, Stacy.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Yeah, we've been trying for like 2 years, actually.
Yeah, Coin Stories is really the go-to podcast to get all the top stories in Bitcoin. I watch it religiously.
Woo! I got to clip that and use that as an ad. Well, first of all, I just want to get an update because people are following your journey in El Salvador. It's been really fun to watch, and I'm super excited for both of you because it seems like you've set up a really nice quality of life for yourself down there, and you're helping with the Bitcoin adoption. So just tell us about your lives. Give us an update.
Wow. Well, first of all, we have to say we're so excited to have our first follower. I believe the United States is now going to become a Bitcoin country as well. And wow, I see today trending on the news on X is strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Mhm.
Of course, El Salvador, we helped create the very first ever globally strategic Bitcoin reserve. And it's remarkable to hear 3 years later, the United States wanting to follow the same trail that we blazed. So that feels incredible. But yeah, every day here in El Salvador, it is paradise. We drink lots of coffee, lots of
Uh-huh.
volcano coffee, try some surfing, and Max is trying some golfing.
Yeah, definitely. So the United States becomes an El Salvadorian territory, essentially. So because this is the leader of the free world, the new vision of freedom to replace the American vision is here in El Salvador. The Statue of Liberty is now a volcano in El Salvador. So the fact that the United States is now kind of mimicking El Salvador and they're falling in line behind President Bukele, as is Argentina and a couple of other countries. So President Bukele is becoming the world president based on Bitcoin, becoming legal tender. And then we're introducing Bitcoin capital markets and we're introducing pretty much everything Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was a major inspiration to make El Salvador the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. So we cleaned up all the violence and the gangs. And a lot that has to do with Bitcoin because Bitcoin demonetizes violence, right? And
Mhm.
it changes the way you think. So that model hopefully will get to the US as well as they follow El Salvador. And you can look forward to a more peaceful country.
I read on Bitcoin X that President Bukele was the first to congratulate President Trump on this election outcome, the first world leader. Is that true? And have they sort of made amends? Because a lot of people remember back when we talked on stage at the Bitcoin conference, Trump came out and said very negative things about El Salvador, and so I was curious your update on that.
President Bukele was the first world leader to congratulate President Trump, and they're good friends. And the United States and El Salvador are good friends. We have, for the first time ever, an El Salvador caucus in the House, led by Matt Gaetz. They're friends, and I think perhaps the way to look at it is that President Bukele was the single only other world leader mentioned at the RNC, right? So that is very important. We are part of the global conversation now, and you can't not think of President Bukele. I assume that President Trump misspoke, and but everybody has on their mind President Bukele, right? So he's so famous, he's so popular, and so it's natural to just always add him. To think of him.
Yeah, definitely. President Trump misspoke. He basically was rattling through a stump speech and made some comments that were just factually not correct. And so, I jumped on it, as an engagement whore that I am, and decided to make it into a big thing. And that got me, they didn't stream our talk at the Bitcoin conference because they were like, oh, what if Max, goes off on a tangent or whatever. But, this is what I like to do in the media space. I'm a media provocateur as well as being a Bitcoin OG. So it's I think now to your point, the Trump Bukele friendship and alliance is extremely strong. It always was. During the first administration, they had a fantastic relationship. And they, I think the whole, and as you know, the Latino vote came out very, very strongly for Trump, and it was the Latinos and Gen X. You know, Stacy's a part of Gen X, and she can explain more. She has a great theory on this, which really shocked me when I heard it because it's so right, spot on. But those demographics are right in the wheelhouse, and so I think we're going to see a lot more synergy going forward.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Bitdeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and AI. As a publicly traded leader, Bitdeer boasts a massive 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity and infrastructure under development across 3 continents, positioning Bitdeer as one of the most diversified and power-dense computing companies in the world. Bitdeer's leadership pioneered the original advancements in Bitcoin mining ASICs and is now poised to disrupt the market again with groundbreaking new designs for the next generation of mining ASICs that are targeted to reach efficiencies of as low as 5 joules per terahash by late next year. Now they're leveraging years of expertise in data center and cloud management into high-performance computing through a partnership with NVIDIA. Join Bitdeer in reshaping the world of Bitcoin mining. Learn more at bitdeer.com and explore how they are pioneering the future today. Well, Stacy, do tell, why are the Gen Zers all about Trump?
No, Gen X. That's what I am with Gen X. And growing up and just the reality, if you look around the world, Gen X is the middle child of generations. Nobody ever talks about us or thinks about us until right now when Trump wins in a landslide. And the reason is we had baby boomers before us. They took all of the attention, grabbed all of the wealth, got everything. They had free love. They had free, hitchhiking across America. They had, the beginning of a 40-year bull market in bonds. Like they had everything at their disposal. So and they controlled the media. So they talked about themselves. They were narcissistic, and they totally ignored us who were like right behind them, the Generation X. And then the babies came along, right? The millennials, and everybody always loves the adorable babies. And they were a big generation, equal in size, close to equal in size, and in terms of the baby boomers. So we were ignored the whole time. And we were the first, they used to call us latchkey children. I was one of them. My mom was working, and I would be like 6 or 7 years old coming home from school on my own with my 2 sisters. And we were just like taking care of ourselves. Nobody cared about our feelings. So we were used to just that sort of rough and tumble language that Trump uses, where, it offends the baby boomers and it really offends the millennials in terms of their hurt feelings all the time. But Gen X is just like, hey, this is the way we grew up, like talking. This is what we used to have. And nobody can hurt our feelings. Like sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt us. That's what we grew up on. And I mean, basically there was also no referee during our childhoods. We were latchkey children. Like I said, we came home and me and my sisters beat each other up, and there was no mom to go like, Mom, like she's beating me up. Like there was like, we just had to settle it ourselves. So I think that's part of the spirit you're seeing is, it's not just President Trump. It's all of those. It's Elon, really. We elected Elon, and Elon is the king of Gen X, right? He is the ultimate Gen X success story.
Yeah, definitely. Stacy and I have been talking about this for almost the 22 years we've been together, because she's Gen X. I'm a baby boomer. And the way she has described this throughout the years is pretty much, Gen X gets ignored. Whenever they say the generationally, what generation did what, they all say the boomers, the millennials, the zoomers, right? They never include Gen X. Gen X is always just passed over. They're ignored. Stacy says it's the middle child. They're just demographically, they drew a hand of being overlooked. And so in this election, it really turned on Gen X, came out incredibly strong for Trump. And it was a protest vote against the boomers. The boomers took everything, and the boomers are fat with retirement money, and they World War II beneficiaries. The millennials are the coddled babies of the boomers, right? They were born with a silver, spoon in their mouths basically, and they're very fragile. They're not anti-fragile.
Yeah, they grew up with helicopter parents, right? And soccer moms.
Yeah,
so
right.
we grew up latchkey, like abandoned and living and taking
Right.
care of
So,
ourselves.
Trump's winning this election, and Stacey's like, yeah, Gen X is sticking it to the boomers right now. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? But I think that it's very, very strong point.
And it's the end of that 50-year US dollar fiat Ponzi, right? And all these boomers, the youngest of them are just about to turn 65, right? And they're all counting on Gen X, which just finally means something, right? We're in our peak earning years. It's 45 years old to 63, I think. And so they're, the boomers are expecting us to pay for their houses and for their social security. So now we get to be like, haha, now you pay attention, right? After 45 years.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to hear you talk about the generations, because it reminds me of the book, The Fourth Turning, which a lot of Bitcoiners bring up. And when I read that book, I found it hard to relate because coming from another country, my family immigrated. My parents don't fit into kind of the descriptions, and I felt like I don't consider myself coddled because we struggled so much growing up, and I'm like, I don't agree with this coddle mentality of the millennials, but maybe when you zoom out, yes, like I agree with some of the generalizations made, and it's crazy. I mean, we're gonna have another boomer president, but this might be the last time we have a boomer as president. Do you agree?
Yeah, but like I said, he was a boomer in 2020 and 2016, but the campaign in 2024 versus those two, he and his family were so prominent. They were the campaign for the previous two campaigns. This time it's Elon, it's JD Vance, it's Vivek. It's Gen X of Elon, but the rest are like millennials, right? JD Vance, Vivek, Tulsi's Gen X, Robert F. Kennedy. So different ideas that are completely not boomer at all. And Trump kept on saying that, by the way, like when he went to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, he was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what Bitcoin is. I don't know. Have fun playing with your crypto. What's a stable coin? Like he was saying all these things and saying, I don't know. My son Barron tells me what to do. And so he didn't mind like just playing the boomer, right?
Yeah. It's you mentioned the fourth turning, and it's interesting because the assumption is that it's very U.S. centric, and so the timetable would be with the U.S. The empire at this time. But as you point out, it's different in different countries, have different histories and different experiences. And what we've been saying the last couple of years with President Bukele here in El Salvador is that there is a thing called the fourth turning, and it does have a certain cause and effect, and it is cyclical, and it does go over time, but it wouldn't necessarily be global synchronicity. It would be different in different countries. And having that thought in mind, we think that El Salvador is the first country out of the fourth turning, because now the hard times have produced good men, have produced strong men, President Bukele, and they're now leading the charge out of the fourth turning. That's another reason why I would say that the U.S. versus El Salvador, the U.S. has definitely not bottomed out. I mean, as much as Trump and his team are A-list, world-class thinkers and doers and business people and political geniuses, they still have to contend with an economy that is rotten to the core in many, many ways. And that's not going to be an easy, flip a switch. And now we're just going to forget the fact that we're $36 trillion in debt and all these other problems. I think there's going to be an adjustment, and that adjustment will not be pleasant.
But I think all these cycles throughout history for thousands of years are kind of like, they're all related. And whenever there's a dark age somewhere, there's an age of lightness somewhere else. Like humanity has always had a pocket of lightness. Whatever we do, whatever we've done to each other throughout history, there's always a pocket of good times and positive things and optimism. I think you could see, for example, what has happened in El Salvador and much of Latin America as well is very tied to the US dollar, especially from 1971. Like everybody knows what WTF happened in 1971. And that you see the echo boom of what happened throughout Latin America. It's just been horrible times, bad times. The civil war in El Salvador started in 1979, soon after the US dollar became just all fiat proof of stake world. And I think the emergence out of that, not only did you require a once in 500 year sort of leader that President Bukele is, but Bitcoin and the sort of people emerging out of the end of that experiment of a global fiat system, I think it was that perfect timing to take us out. It was a cycle. It was the necessity of that global fiat currency regime kind of the entropy setting in and it falling apart with too much debt. And I think that was also necessary, as well as the 1 in 500 year sort of leader.
Right. And the millennials in El Salvador were certainly not coddled. And the cyclical nature of all of this is fascinating. I did want to get your take because you've been very bearish on America. I'm assuming that's one of the reasons you left. You call out the shenanigans that have happened as the result of central bank monetary manipulation. Are you feeling hope that things can improve because we are moving potentially in the direction of having like a strategic reserve and maybe solving some of our debt issues? Or do you think that it's something that the powers that be are going to try to maintain their monopoly over money, and it's going to really be a clash between Bitcoiners and the freedom fighters versus the forces of control?
I think America is back and from the brink of extinction and the brink of disaster. And that's the way it's been in the United States since the beginning. I remember back in the 1980s, I was a stockbroker on Wall Street. And at that time, Japan was going to rule the world. The Nikkei average was the most traded and the highest valued exchange in the world. 1 square foot in the Royal Palace was worth more than Manhattan. And then in 1989, it all crashed, and it crashed horribly. And there was a move toward the internet because the internet really started to catch on in the mid 90s, right? When you had a commercially available browser with Netscape, and then suddenly it became a retail product. And this unleashed American creativity, whereas Japan thrived on obedience and essentially without any conformity, and that's what made them so powerful manufacturing. And they were doing cars cheaply and they're exporting those cars, right? But the internet economy that burst onto the scene and really born in the Silicon Valley didn't favor conformity. It favored a huge outburst of creativity. And so the US economy then dominated the world again through the internet and everything that's come with the internet and these huge multi-trillion-dollar companies now that came out of the internet age. So then we go into a period of darkness that we're coming out of. And I don't want to dwell on what's been going on in the American politics for the last 15 years that is so horrendous, but it's just to focus on the fact that you have an Elon Musk who was made in America and could only happen in America, could never happen in Europe. Europe is not entrepreneurial whatsoever. Asia is very conformist. It's not entrepreneurial in the same way. And so Elon has given back. He was created by America. Now he saved America effectively with the partnership with Trump. And they're setting the stage for a massive comeback on the world stage. So, yeah, I've been bearish, on America. I think a lot of that is just being pragmatic, and anything you say against the church of American values is perceived very negatively and being, quote, anti-American. But, my family goes back 300 years, before the American Revolution, right? Nobody. But I was more American than I am. I freaking, was one of the founding, people of this country. So my family. So it's great to see that the Constitution worked, the Bill of Rights worked, the separation of powers works, the separation, the checks and balances worked, right? All those things that the founding fathers put together worked. And that negative elements of, let's call it socialism, for the moment, got stopped out. That's what I would say.
I think, Max mentioned mindset, and that's something that President Bukele talks about for El Salvador. Like, he provided the security. He took the risk of the security regime that he introduced in March of 2022. The world, like yelled at him. The United States said horrible things about him, but it worked, right? The transformation of El Salvador is deep and real. And he has brought peace to the people, and people are, the Salvadoran people are happy. But the same thing so he provided the peace. And last year on Independence Day here, which is September 15th, so September 15th of 2023, he said, okay, you have peace now. You can actually start building, you can start doing things, but you need to shift your mindset now. You need to be ready to move to the front of the class. Yeah, for 40, 50 years, in Latin America and in the Latino population in the United States, many Salvadoran Americans will tell you that they used to try to hide their accent. They used to try to speak with a Mexican accent instead, because to say you were from El Salvador was like a failed state. So they would pretend not to be Salvadoran outside of El Salvador. So that mindset is now like, you don't hide, you have to seize the day. Like we're the leaders of the world. We have, President Bukele is the most popular leader in the world, and everybody's talking about us. Now step to the front of the class, like shine.
Yeah, one of the fantastic things that's been going on here is Stacy was really instrumental in bringing on several education programs. And one of them is called Cuba Plus. And so they canvassed all the high schools in the country. They found the best and the brightest. They trained them up on Bitcoin. And then something incredible happened. She got them to travel to Europe and other countries around the world. And for the first time in these people, the youngsters' experience, they were approached by Europeans and people from outside of all over the world and saying, wow, you're from El Salvador. All I hear is great things. Your president is great. Right. And they were shocked. They were shocked to the bone. That this is really happening. So it made everything very real for them. So then they come back and they spread the word amongst that high school generation. Like, you know what? We're hot shit. People outside of the world recognize that we are the place to be. And so that's had a huge factor, I think.
That was our actual intention with Cuba Plus. Is yes, we are training them in technical skills of engineering Bitcoin and Lightning, becoming Bitcoin and Lightning devs. But we took the very, very best after a very rigorous program and flew, so far, I think it's about 16 of Salvadoran students to Tuscany and Lugano.
Oh, wow.
And so many of them, it was their first trip ever outside of El Salvador. So to go to Tuscany and Switzerland, it's a very long flight. But, they met people like Adam Back, and they're, the way somebody like Adam Back, who they read about and understand by the point that they're going there because they're full Bitcoiners, and they're like, wow, he's impressed with us because we're from El Salvador. And, their sense of self-esteem just soars, and they come back, and you could see the transformation in the 1 or 2 weeks that they're over there. They come back and they're like walking taller, they're more confidently speaking, and it's brilliant to see. But every year we add another 15 to 20 students, and they help each other gain that same sort of mindset.
It's so inspiring to hear about these initiatives. And, Bitcoin I feel like it represents so much hope, which both of you talk about. It's also this representation of truly a free market and competing for value. But it's up against the ultimate power of these banks, which I know you guys are so familiar with. And again, you've called attention to this through your work and your show. So how do you think that the old legacy world and traditional finance will really integrate with Bitcoin now that places like the United States are talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve?
I think if you read Nick Batia's book, Layer One Money, I think therein lies your answer of what a future might look like under a global Bitcoin standard. And that is more decentralized power. It won't be so centralized, because obviously the banks, BlackRock is one of the biggest investment banks in the world, and they're huge into Bitcoin. And Larry Fink is a Bitcoiner, right? Well, a lot of their power is maintained through state force in a way. The moat, the regulatory moat that has been established. But I think just like before we even came to El Salvador, before we first came, when President Bukele first announced in June of 2021 that he would introduce a bill making Bitcoin legal tender, what we said is that this could be like a Florence, right? So think of Florence and all of the amazing, legacy left behind, the amazing art, the age of discovery, astronomy, all sorts of stuff that was invented and created and built there. Well, there was no global central bank. Okay. There was a Vatican. They had a lot of power, but they had a lot of powerful city states and a lot of other powerful bankers in Florence as well, besides just Medici. So I think you're going to have more of that. So Michael Saylor will have, he has a huge amount of capital, Bitcoin capital, and this is the new global capital, right? So if you have a lot of capital, it will help you, have a more a power separate to what the Fed, like the Fed won't be able to confer any power or moat around Michael Saylor or any of these other big whales and there are many, right, all over the world, some of them public, most of them private.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I see happening. So here in El Salvador, we have another program called Node Nation. So high school students all over the country are creating their own Bitcoin nodes. And it's going to be the most noted country in the world pretty soon. And what happens is there's a transition where the people who are hodling Bitcoin on their nodes at home, there'll be a crossover point where the home capital ownership will be greater than the state's capital ownership. And then you'll see that flip from a centralized nation state to a decentralized nation state. And you get to the point where whoever is governing the nation and taking care of things like taking out the garbage and engaging in defending the country from outside threats, they will have to go to the nodes and get their buy-in on spending money, because all the money will be owned by the nodes. The paper money will all go to zero, as it always has throughout history. The nodes will have all the capital, so that there will be no central bank. It'll be a decentralized capital structure owned by the citizens, who then get to decide what the country as such might engage in and volunteer their money for it or not volunteer their money for it.
Ben Franklin famously had said when they came out of the Constitutional Congress to a woman who asked, what do we have, right? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. And that's talking about the mindset, the active engagement as a citizen. And that's something that is kind of a moat for us in terms of this Bitcoin standard emerging globally, is that we have 3 years head start on everybody else. A lot of media, legacy media, certainly, especially, they miss what has been happening here in El Salvador, partly because, President Bukele is such a star, right? And he's charismatic and captivating. So people want to talk about him. But what they miss is like what we're doing on that education front that Max talks about. We have the deepest, most comprehensive and brilliant education programs. Like we have Me Premier Bitcoin through all of our high schools. We have Kubo Plus, which is that advanced Bitcoin and Lightning Devs program. And because of our brand of Bitcoin country, we've had the best educators in the world, the best builders in the Bitcoin space, willing to fly here and come teach our students in person, doing boot camps and hackathons. Like, it's such a privilege, and it's a moment in history that we were able to take advantage of before everybody climbs in and everybody's like demanding that Adam Back show up, or Peter Todd or Jimmy Song, right? They're going to be in demand. But we have this opportunity for the past 3 years to have our students educated by them. We have Node Nation, which is a program in our high schools as well here. And that is teaching students how to assemble a node, a full node and a lightning node, also how to use mining equipment. So, they're getting a deep knowledge. We also, Max and I helped with a program for our civil servants here. So 80,000 civil servants have received a 3-day course, a certificate course in Bitcoin. Max and I provide the 1-hour masterclass opening it, but Giacomo Zucco does 3 days of training. It's through video for him. 3 days of training on the technical aspects and historical and philosophical aspects of Bitcoin. We also have what we're working with Lena Seish on and Me Premier Bitcoin to develop a program for 2nd through 6th grade. So there'll be 4 different workbooks, And we've just about finished for second grade and third grade that gets introduced in January. So it takes the time that it takes. Like we've been doing this for 3 years, educating tens of thousands of people here on so many aspects of Bitcoin, not just technical, not just how to send money in a Bitcoin wallet or a Lightning wallet. We're like teaching them so many different aspects of Bitcoin. And every single country will, like, you can't rush it up, right? You can't speed it up. You have to go through the process of implementing the program and then teaching the teachers and then teaching the students. Every single step takes time.
Yeah, one of the questions we always get is, well, what happens when Bukele leaves, right? He's got 4.5 more years in his second term. And I think what we're seeing here is a couple of things. Number one is the education Stacy talks about. So these educated students will be adults and they will not want to go back to the pre-Bukele existence of being dependent on the IMF and outside money and being ruled by gangs, obviously. Also, there'll be, by that time, I think, a transition of the wealth of the nation will have transitioned to the note holders. So if this all works the way I hope it works personally, it would be that by the time Bukele wraps it up in 4.5 years, the wealth of the nation will be owned by the people of the nation on their nodes. And we'll have a decentralized governance model on the nation state level.
Plus, there's been 40 years of losing here. Yeah. Almost 50. Yeah, 45 years of losing. And so to have 45 years of just losing and having to flee the country, that was the number one hope for your child, is that they could flee the country and go to America. And now it's the opposite. When you're suddenly winning, like, you don't want to go back. But also we're shifting that mindset to be a Bitcoiner. Think of Bitcoiners and think of all these like confident assholes like Max. Back when Bitcoin was $300, I just saw Bitcoin Magazine just tweeted a link of a clip of Max at $300 Bitcoin saying it was going to be $1 million. Think of Hal Finney before there was even a price to Bitcoin saying it was going to be like $100,000, right? Like, this is the attitude of a Bitcoiner. They were already, even before there was a price, was saying like, oh, these central banks are dinosaurs now. They're going to be history. They don't even know it. And you're like, it's 2010 and there's not even a price yet on Bitcoin. Like, what are you talking about, you lunatic? And of course, it happened. But that's the same sort of attitude of a leader and a shift in epochs. And we're going through one now. President Bukele has always had that. Everybody said, like, what the heck? You're from El Salvador. It's a failed state. You can't do this. You can't bring peace. You can't have a Bitcoin standard. You can't do this stuff, right? And he kept on like, told you so, told you so, told you so, like success after success. But that's the mindset of a Bitcoiner. He had a mindset of a Bitcoiner, so it was natural that he would find Bitcoin because his attitude was of that.
This episode is brought to you by Casa. As some of you know, I recently updated my self-custody, and Casa makes self-custody so easy even if you've never held your own keys or used multisig before. Casa has a state-of-the-art app and live experts standing by to guide you every step of the way. For those with large Bitcoin holdings, Casa just rolled out a new service. It now offers a holistic security advisory service. As a private client, you'll get a 7-step security overhaul, personalized consulting, and your own private emergency line for expert help when you need it most. Get 10% off your Casa plan at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Speed, the fastest growing Lightning wallet in the world. Send and receive Bitcoin, swap with stable coins, and even snag gift cards to earn rewards, all in seconds. Download Speed via the QR code or the link in my show notes and use code COINSTORIES10 for 5,000 free sats. And finally, are you ready to take control of your wealth? The Bitcoin Way is here to empower you. Learn how to take full self-custody and eliminate all counterparty risk. Set up a node and become the master of your own transactions and enjoy true autonomy. And upgrade your cybersecurity and protect your online privacy like I did. The Bitcoin Way specializes in personalized one-on-one training to help you become fully self-sovereign. Schedule a free consultation today. All right, back to the show. Yeah, and when I met him, I really was I was inspired by the fact that he had really done his homework, and he mentioned reading the books of Ray Dalio and Saifedean, and he really understood economic policy and monetary history. He does get a lot of criticism, though, so I wanted to get your take on that, that some people still call him a dictator, and even people within the Bitcoin space. I feel like everyone loves Max and Stacy, and the only criticism I've seen is, why are you cozying up to a politician? You call out the politician. So what's your response to that?
First of all, he's not a politician. He's a leader, right? A leader is somebody who inspires. Like a leader attracts the best and brightest. The best and brightest come here to El Salvador to move here, to live here, to build here, to teach our students here because of what he has done to transform a nation. But look through history. It's not hard. I mean, it is hard to find somebody like him. There are very, very few. There's like a couple dozen men throughout history. In terms of calling him a dictator, these are the same people that said that 81 million Americans just voted for Hitler too, right? We know it's an absurdity, and we know that they're the ones that are projecting onto others their own mindset. They're the ones that we found through the Twitter files from once Elon released them, that they were the ones shutting down discourse and free speech. They're the ones that are saying on the news only 2 or 3 days ago, saying that whatever happens with the election, we need to shut down Elon Musk. I think that was Rachel Maddow on a mainstream press in America on the cable news. And you're like, that's the mindset of an authoritarian. That's how you think when you're an authoritarian. So they were, I believe they're just projecting onto President Bukele because, you know, he's rejecting their paradigm of failure and bad times, eternal bad times for people, where these small set of elites get to have the revolving door of helping each other, and the rest of the world has to suffer.
Yeah, let me once again quote Saint Michael, the Giga Chad. So what Michael Saylor has said, which is very true, nobody who's ever spent 100 hours studying Bitcoin thinks it's bad. Nobody who's actually put the work in to Bitcoin has anything bad to say about it. Nobody, not a single person in the entire world who's actually read a few books and thought about Bitcoin has a negative opinion about Bitcoin. The Nassim Talebs and the Peter Schiffs of the world, when they talk about Bitcoin, you know, they haven't even spent 5 minutes looking at it. So they have critical things to say about it. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're talking about. The same thing with El Salvador. Nobody who's come to El Salvador and actually talked to people on the ground here has anything like that to say, negative to say about it, or the president. All this criticism comes from people who've never been here or who don't live here. And even Salvadorans who maybe lived here 20 years ago, they don't live here now. So they're just making uninformed opinions. Anyone who comes here, spends time here, talks to people here, will say that this is the land of economic freedom. Bukele is a leader like John F. Kennedy is a leader, or Steve Jobs is a leader, right? Now, I've not found a single person, and I've been here 3 years, and I've talked to thousands of people who's actually done their homework, who then says, well, I've been here, I studied it, and here's my criticism. That doesn't exist. It's like a chimera. That doesn't exist. It's in the phantasmagorical minds of those in the United States who are jealous that everything they thought America should be is actually now in El Salvador.
Yes. And Max always brought up long ago when they first called President Bukele a dictator, is like, what sort of dictator in history gives their citizens absolute economic sovereignty? I mean, but that's what Bitcoin delivers.
Yeah, what dictator has reverse migration from people leaving where they are, like in the US, and fleeing the United States dictatorship of authoritarian, speech killers, and go moving back to El Salvador, which is what we see in the southern border. More people going south than going north. Okay, that's because they are going to the light, to the lightness.
Well, I will share that when I visited El Salvador, I've had the chance to be there twice and get together with you guys. I did meet so many people who either themselves came back from the United States or had family that fled the country but were now planning to come back. And we went to places like Hope House, which Stacy, that place is so inspiring too, and what they're doing for women to empower them. And I was shocked to hear that their dream was no longer the American dream, it was the El Salvador dream. And
Right.
I know this is totally anecdotal, but like every person that I would talk to, even if I was in a cab, whether it was in El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, or San Salvador, I would ask, like, what do you think about President Bukele? Being a little mini journalist, I was like, what do you think? What do you think? I did not hear one person say anything bad about him.
100% positive rating.
Yeah.
Okay, if he were on, Google reviews as a pizza joint, it would be rated 10, 100,000, right? No negative review at all.
So President Bukele is the highest rated pizza joint of heads of state.
So let me ask you, because Elon Musk has recently visited, he's had so many high profile people in El Salvador, but I didn't see any mention of Bitcoin when people talked about that visit or even the Tucker Carlson interview. I was really looking for a Bitcoin part of that conversation. Do you know if those conversations happened and why aren't they more public? Why aren't more of these people talking about the Bitcoin component of El Salvador's success?
So think of it. He also went to Argentina recently, and as soon as he walked into the office of the vice president, she asked, "I want to talk to you about security policy and Bitcoin." Look at that INSEAD case study that was recently published, which is extraordinary, and I really recommend everybody go download this because it's a case study. INSEAD is the top business school in Europe, and they did a study showing the transformation of El Salvador and using it as a case study and how a country can transform itself from a place of despair to a place of hope and prosperity. And they said the two pillars of the strategy of rebranding the country, security and Bitcoin. So I think it's part of our brand, right? You can't separate Bitcoin from El Salvador. We were first. President Bukele, when he made the move to stop the gangs, it was a huge risk. All the global organizations, multilaterals, and the United States were against it, but he succeeded. And everybody sees that. And now he is he set the standard, the Bukele model, as I call it, throughout Latin America, or the Bukele miracle. And so many countries, including Argentina, are actually adopting it. They're setting down in law, like the actual framework that President Bukele did. And we're seeing the same now with Bitcoin as well. So I think so to answer that question, I think it is a conversation that he was with Elon Musk for 3 hours. And they only tweeted like 2 sentences about it, right? So there were 3 hours of conversation. It is top of everybody's mind. They all think of the end of the gang situation here, the total eradication to go from the most dangerous country on earth when he took office to the safest in the Western Hemisphere is always the number one topic of conversation. People want to know how he did it. And number 2 is always Bitcoin, because it is part of our transformation. And we're leaders because of that, right? We're leading the world. That we set the standard on Bitcoin policy and Bitcoin adoption. We were the first country. El Salvador was the first country. President Bukele was the first leader to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now the United States is following our lead. So of course it's the number one topic of conversation. I think they also know, like, even with Elon, look at what he does, not what he says. Look at his holdings at Tesla and SpaceX. He's a massive holder of Bitcoin, but he rarely ever talks about it ever in public. And he'll just like tweet about a joke coin, right? Doge.
Yeah.
So I think he's just doing that because maybe he doesn't want to be seen as like pumping his bags or whatever. Like he doesn't want to be involved in that, but you just watch what he does. And that's what I think is the important message.
Well, I think we need an updated Bitcoin focused interview with President Bukele, and I'm going to cross my fingers that maybe I can do it in the future.
Yeah.
Update us on, there's some cool things happening in El Salvador right now with the volcano coffee. I got sent some. I was so grateful. It was delicious. And also the golf invitational. So let's talk about those. The Bean of Fire. There you go.
This is Bean of Fire. This is President Bukele's own brand. He grew this himself. Like he's a farmer, a coffee farmer now. And this is for Christmas. You could buy this. This is $120, and you get 4 bags of volcano coffee. And again, like you have to, don't trust me, verify. Like, and I know you have verified this, Natalie, but Volcano coffee is different from anything else. There is so much energy in it, and it is so crisp and clean and just such a nice flavor. It's hard to describe. Max and I, it's just ruined it. Ruined Paris for us, ruined Italy. We used to be like, love to sip coffee all day in the cafe in Paris. And now we go there and we're like, ugh, this is so bitter. How is this? But this beanifier is volcano coffee from President Bukele himself. Look, here's some bags. You get a nice bag.
No, I got a package in the mail and I was like, oh my God, I got from a president of a nation, I got coffee. I don't know, I'm not worthy.
Well, he sent it to you as a coffee farmer, right? He's just passionate about it, like everything about his farm, and he likes to grow the coffee and learn about the process.
Yeah, this is another one of the ideas that I had that's been rejected. I'm an advisor, but my ideas never get accepted. I wanted to shoot a commercial with the president in the coffee farm, like dressed up like Juan Valdez from the Colombian coffee ads, and kind of going into a supermarket with a donkey or something and talking about, the coffee. And but that got rejected. Another one of my ideas on the cutting room floor. So I never seem to get any traction.
That's important for brainstorming, though. You have to, somebody has to say something completely insane.
Okay, what about the golf invitation?
All right, so the golf invitation. Yeah. So I was at Bitcoin Nashville Bitcoin conference, and I met these guys, Joe, Trey, and Rocky, and they wrote a piece for Bitcoin Magazine called Bitcoin and Golf, and they equated the low time preference aspects of golf and the individual sovereignty of golf with Bitcoin. And it got a lot of attention, and I read through it, met these guys, and they're like golf fanatics. And I said, we should do a tournament in El Salvador. And so I contacted the head of at the El Encanto Country Club, which is the #1 golf spot in the country, probably in Latin America. And so I pitched the idea, and they said, yeah, that's great. So it's January 10th and 11th. It's a 2-day event. There's a meetup Friday night in El Zonte by the beach. And we sold out in 40 minutes. So we got 100 golfers from around the world. They thought that we should charge $250 a ticket. We said, no, these are Bitcoiners. We'll charge $400. Sold out in 40 minutes. Then we sold another lots and lots of sponsorships. So we raised a ton of money for this event. It'll be a 2-day event. I'd like to think of it as the best of a Bitcoin conference without the worst of a Bitcoin conference. So that's what we'll have, plenty of that all day for 2 days. We'll have a few high profile Bitcoiners there talking about cool stuff. So you get all the schmoozing, all the socializing, you get to play golf, you get to go to the beach, you get to go swimming. There's a meetup on Friday night. I'm bringing in some high profile speakers for that. So it's kind of like a conference too. And this is going to be the first of an annual event. So this is really the Bitcoin lifestyle here in El Salvador. We came here when they made Bitcoin legal tender. We've been living here for 3 years. Now we're living the Bitcoin life with sun, coffee, golf at the country club, swimming at the beach, right? It's a lifestyle. The Max and Stacy brand is the Bitcoin El Salvador lifestyle. Live it on January 10th and 11th, but it is completely sold out.
And is there a purse in Satoshis?
Yeah, there's the first prize is a custom made orange jacket, which is a $15,000 creation that's being done in Italy. You can win a car if you hit a hole-in-one on one hole. Another hole-in-one hole, you get a whole Bitcoin of $76,000. We got watches. We've got all kinds of prizes. I got hundreds of thousands of dollars with the prizes.
And I want to say, Being a Fire will be there. We'll have some coffee mocktails and cocktails. And importantly, like one thing I want to say about this Being a Fire coffee, you can buy some at beanafire.com, but it is the story of El Salvador. You touched on this earlier that when you come here, when you see El Salvador, you see what 40 years and 50 years of bad times hid from the world. Those headlines of being the most dangerous place on earth, really, a lot of people in the world then missed a jewel, right? You come here and it's astounding how nice the people are, despite those headlines. That was the first shock for us. Like we at that time that we first arrived, it was still considered one of the most dangerous places on earth. And you arrive And it's weird because compared to Argentina or Brazil or Colombia or Mexico, like people are so nice. And it was, that was a little bit disconcerting at first that it was so contrary to the headlines. But the beaches are beautiful. They're the best surf in the world. The volcanoes are beautiful. The landscape is beautiful. The people are beautiful. The food is beautiful. And the coffee is amazing. It was one of the most famous coffee growing countries in the world. And then, of course, all of the civil war and the bad times, hindered a lot of the progress and the exports in that market. But we're back. El Salvador's back. And it's everything here is the best and the brightest. It's so good. It's so amazing.
And the sunrises and sunsets are so incredible there.
Oh my God. Until you see what it's like, you have to see it to believe it. That's a good photo. That's a great photo.
This is the sunset in El Zonte when I was there. It was amazing.
And you get to see the sunset and the sunrise from the same point, obviously a different point in the horizon, but you get to see it on,
incredible.
Yeah, I should mention also that Bitcoin Sports Network is organizing the golf tournament. So Bitcoin Sports Network, we met them in Nashville. So it's Frida and Chris, and they have developed this amazing business of doing golf tournaments with Bitcoiners, usually attached to events and things like that. So those two have been incredible at actually organizing everything. And the organization on the back end of this has been absolutely amazing. The granularity down to, the size of the T markers that we're having printed by crypto cloaks, where they're going to have Bitcoin T markers 3D printed. So we need those at each hole, and just the dimensions of the T markers, how they would look from different distances. Like they're really fanatically detail oriented, much more than I could ever be in 5 lifetimes. And so it's just like, it's going to be such a fantastic event.
I love it. Well, I guess it's sold out, but I'll link it in the show notes. I'll link Being a Fire. But while I still have you, I just have 2 questions left. One thing that I hear, especially lately with Bitcoin reaching a new all-time high from newcomers, is I'm too late. And even if I were to accrue an entire Bitcoin, which is so hard for the average person in the United States, much less anywhere else, they think, well, even if I accrue one, okay, maybe it goes to $1 million. I can't retire on $1 million, and they feel like this discouragement that they won't be able to catch up to where the cost of living is going and the cost of houses. What do you say to people who feel like even accumulating a little bit of Bitcoin or a couple Bitcoin is just not enough today?
Right. Well, 2 points. Number one, everything goes to zero against Bitcoin. So everything you have that's not Bitcoin in terms of purchasing power is going to zero against Bitcoin. Stocks, bonds, fiat money, your property. So the only wealth you're ever going to have going forward is your Bitcoin wealth. So you need to start accumulating immediately, because every single thing that you own is going to zero against Bitcoin, number one. Number two, there's an equal argument to be made against those who are too early into Bitcoin, like myself. And what I mean by this is that we were at a meetup, the halving party in El Salvador. And this 9-year-old kid comes up to me and said the exact same thing. Am I too late for Bitcoin? And I'm looking at this 9-year-old, and it suddenly struck me that, you know what, I'm too early in Bitcoin, because the world that will be built because of Bitcoin will happen after I'm gone. I won't see it. I'll be dead. In 20 years, 25 years, I'll be gone. But the world will have gone hyper Bitcoinization. And that 9-year-old will be living in a much, much different world where violence is demonetized, where inflation is no longer a threat from the state, where you don't even have a nation state. You have no central banks. It'll be a much better world that 9-year-old will live in. And how much Bitcoin they have or don't have won't be really much of a factor anyway, because that's more of a proof of stake mentality than a proof of work mentality. Any Bitcoin you have, whether it's even 1 Satoshi, gives you, as Stacy has said, gives you fuck you money, right? So you are individually sovereign, and that's priceless, right? So that's the argument. I mean, I'm too early. So everybody, once you get into the vibe, you're in the vibe, and live the life.
That's what I was going to say, is that I've long said that even 1 Satoshi is FU money. And it's not just, that's an attitude and it's a mindset. That's what I'm saying, is like, once you once you have that liberty, it's hard to go back, right? You're a different person. It transforms you as a person to have individual sovereignty and economic liberty, even one Satoshi. And it puts you at the table with the best and brightest around the world. When, I mean, everybody knows how much Bitcoin Saylor has, but most people, we don't know how much they have, right? So you're sitting at the table with Adam Back, like our students here, and maybe some of them only have like 1,000 Satoshis, but they're sitting at a table with Adam Back. They don't know if he has 1,000 Satoshis or 1,000 Bitcoin. We don't know. And that's pretty amazing feeling to sit at the table with like the founding fathers of a new economic paradigm, a new monetary, epoch, and to be equals with all of them. We're still early. You could still sit at a table with the likes of Adam Back, and that means we're still early. That's more important than any wealth accumulation or competing with Michael Saylor per se.
Yeah, and like the idea that, well, I buy Bitcoin now, it'll be worth $1 million, and that's not enough. Well, enough for what? Right? What do you can get off the hamster wheel. Don't compare yourself to others. Just compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Are you better today than you were yesterday? That's the only thing you have to think about. And if Bitcoin keeps appreciating against everything else and everything else goes to zero, at the end of the day that, yeah, you know what? Actually, my purchasing power just went up. So I'm a winner. Good night.
Yeah, that actually kind of brings up a point that was, for me, my personal liberation was that notion of low time preference. And having that low time preference, it's hard to describe until you experience it. Mm-hmm. But it is very liberating. It's so, you become so much more relaxed, less stressed out, less on that hamster wheel. And just, it's so much more freedom to think and just to believe in yourself. And I think until you experience it, just get one Satoshi, right? And you'll start to feel it. You'll start to think you're about to take down the global central banks with your one Satoshi.
And you see it with the shitcoin market. So people who are trading shitcoins, they are the same people you see at the casinos dumping money into slot machines and pressing this button like drunken hamsters. And the mentality of losing is very infectious. And the dopamine hit from losing is greater than winning. And people get addicted to losing. And anyone who trades shitcoin is addicted to losing. And of course they will lose, because that's the greatest emotional high they get, is from losing, not winning. That's very true in the investment market. Look at a Warren Buffett, for example. He slowly, steadily wins year after year. And he's not a flashy guy. He lives in Omaha. He's not going, on CNBC every day, flashing his jets here and there and whatever. And the same thing at Bitcoin. I mean, Michael Saylor, he's not much of a different person than he was 5 years ago. He still carries himself the same way. He has the same values. He always had integrity. He's the longest serving CEO in America, tech CEO, right? Has been for 25 years. He was going to quit. When I had my fireside chat with him in 2021, which everyone focuses on the first 12 seconds when I'm screaming, okay, fine. But the actual chat was, I say, you were about to quit. You were at the end of your career. And he says, yes, that's true. I was all set up to pass my company along and just retire. Then I found Bitcoin, it saved me. And it gave me a purpose. Yeah. And that's what he will tell you is the greatest thing that Bitcoin has done for him, is not the money. It's the giving him a purpose in life. And his passion, if you've ever talked to him, is education. Right. That has been for years, education. And look at the hope.com and all these things are free education. That's what Michael Saylor is about. It's not about the zeros at the end of his net worth. And he said it when he dies, all that Bitcoin goes back into the pot. He's not, I think that's foolish, because I know, after talking to Satoshi in a dream I had, that Bitcoin, you can use it in the afterlife. You can take it with you. So I think Michael Saylor is going to be shocked, because he'll die. He'll be at the pearly gates. And he'll say, we only take Bitcoin, Michael, because of what you told us. And we're like, but I gave mine all away. They'll say he has to go to hell. He's going to have to go to hell because he'll be broke. He'll have no Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I think Bitcoin brings out the best in us and it does amplify, I guess, who you really are, but it really empowers you and that goes to what you said, Stacy, about the low time preference, which I think flows perfectly to my last question. I'll never forget the conversation we had in El Salvador where Stacy, your background is media and storytelling, and you talked about how we're in a story and it's the ultimate fight between good and evil. And it's time for good to win. And Bitcoin is this ultimate force for good. And I would love for you to articulate that because I think it's such a message of hope and such a good place to end this conversation.
Yeah, actually, kind of that's the origin story of me and Max meeting as well. So I worked in Hollywood, and Hollywood, when you're working on scripts and screen writing stuff, like you read Aristotle's Poetics, and Aristotle also gives you the five qualities of money, right? Like, so it makes sense that he is the go-to guy with a simple explanation of good money, sound money, and the guy for a good story. And what he says is like man against man, man against nature, or man against himself. Those are the three stories, the foundational stories of all narratives of humankind. Like, and the good guy has to win, right? The good guy is supposed to win. And that's how I was brought up in Hollywood. So when I met Max and he started to tell me the stories of him being a banker and all the stuff that was happening on Wall Street, I was like, no way. No, you're lying. These
bad
aren't
guys win.
Yeah. And that's what I said. I was like, the bad guy, you're telling me the bad guy is winning. And I don't believe that. Like that just goes against everything I've ever been taught about everything around me. And at that time, and before the Keiser report, the only place you could find information out about the monetary system and banking and all that stuff was in the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. They were pretty honest with each other, but they weren't, providing the editorial like we were, right? So they were just like laying out all their crimes and all the stuff they were doing. And so we started to, my background in Hollywood, I started to when we did our podcast, like we started to talk about this story. So with El Salvador and what you're seeing here, what Bitcoin is part of the story of transformation, is that this is a story, and that's why people are so captivated by El Salvador. That's why President Bukele is the most popular leader in the world, because it is the most dramatic hook into the third act, right? This is exactly the sort of captivating, this is how you have a box office hit in Hollywood. You have that, bleak times for 40 years, gang war, families being slaughtered, the murder capital of the world. And then enter this guy who is elected and transforms the country into the safest place in the Western Hemisphere and introduces Bitcoin. Like, these are the sort of dramatic hooks that, Hollywood dreams of. This is what you need to change the narrative. And then the narrative has changed about El Salvador, and the narrative has changed because of Bitcoin. As you kind of mentioned, yeah, you could have watched the Keiser report and think we were being negative about the US, but what we were being negative about was that the story, the narrative that had happened, it was ever bleaker times because of Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks, because of the money printing. And then the money printing led to more money printing, and the money printing led to cantillionaires, and it led to abuse by those cantillionaires because they become entitled. And it set in motion the tragedy of our times. And now Bitcoin has transformed, is part of the transformation, is one part of the transformation. But I don't think it's a coincidence. Like, I think it's here. The fact that Trump was speaking at a Bitcoin conference, the fact that day one of him post-election, they're talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think this is part of the hope. This is part of the change of narrative, that like times can get better. Damn, we can get to Mars. Like, Max, when he was 9 years old, watched a man land on the moon. And then 2 years later, they introduced an all fiat world, and we never went back to the moon. Like, that was it. Like, imagine the hope that you're like, yeah, things are going to get great. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to go to Venus. We're going to go to like everywhere, everything. We could do anything. But instead, we just ate everything that we had built, right? We consumed it all. And now I think it's the beginning of times to build. That was something that Elon Musk said the day after the election. It's time to build, right? Let's get building. And people love to build. Like, that's a narrative. That's a story. That's community. That's a family. That's building stuff for, that's low time preference. And people feel good about that. And people are building El Salvador, the new El Salvador. People are building the new America. And the new America might look like the old America, but that was like pretty amazing.
Yeah, one of the stories that came out of this last election that I think is really a reflection of some greater themes here is how critical the Amish community was in Pennsylvania in winning that state. The Amish community is very self-sufficient, and they are builders. The famous scenes of them building barns for each other and this type of thing. They reject a lot of the crass commercialization and adulteration of our food stock and our medicine. During the COVID crisis, of course, they famously sailed through the crisis because they didn't buy the propaganda, the government propaganda at that time. And, this is a community that's been in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I told you that my family goes back 300 years. That's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Lancaster Gazette was a newspaper during the Revolutionary War times that my relatives back in that era were the editor of that newspaper. And in the cemeteries in Lancaster, you'll see a lot of Keisers buried there, spelled Keiser. Those are my ancestors. So, and when I was young, we used to go to the Amish country and visit these communities and see what was happening there. And, it made an impression on me. And, here we are in 2024, when the community in the United States that would be characterized as the least technologically advanced ended up being the most influential in the one swing state that delivered the president. And I think there's some beautiful irony in that.
I love that whole message. Bitcoin is going to be our happy ending. I really do believe it will win. And I want to say again, how much we owe to you, Max and Stacy, for the education that you've done throughout the years. I've met so many people who are only in Bitcoin because of you and because of the light that you shined on the injustices that exist in our current financial system. And your show is it's so incredible. The fact that you were so early, you deserve all your success and all that Bitcoin. We're very happy for you and very grateful that you took the time to join the show. Any final thoughts?
I love bull markets, because during the bear markets, the message is the complete opposite. You scoundrels, you dirty, rotten, no good nicks. You got me in at 70,000. Now it's 16,000. Or you got me in at 1,000. Now it's 100. You got me in at 30 and now it's $1. Go run out of town. So it's bull markets are great. I love them. But you know what? 24 months from now or 12 months or whatever, it's going to be back to meme war.
Yeah. No, it's good to have been part of that. And it was simply, like you said, the fact that it needed a happy ending. For me, in my mind, how I grew up and my experience in Hollywood, I needed a happy ending. And this seemed like a way towards a happy ending. Like Max actually suggested at first, I thought we had made a big mistake because when we first covered Bitcoin on our show, it was $1 and then it went up to $30 within 2 or 3 months. I think it was like July of 2011. It went up to $30 and then it fell to $1. And we did have quite a lot of hate mail in the YouTube comments. Unfortunately, because of the bad times over the past decade since Trump won in 2016, all those videos are off of YouTube. They deleted them all because of that whole stuff. But nevertheless, back then in 2011, we had people complaining that they dumped their life savings into Bitcoin at $30 because of Max. And now it's only $1 and he's ruined their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a post of me went viral taking my friends to dinner at the last all-time high in 2021. And of course, we know what happened after that. And that I think marked the top, but hey, they're all in the green now. So you just have to hodl long enough. Max and Stacy, it's always such a pleasure. I hope to get to see you both in person soon. Thank you so, so much. It's been really fun.
And come back soon. I see you already look way tanner than I do, even though I live in the tropics.
I need to come back. President Bukele, please. We were going to do an interview and then it didn't work out. So I'm still hoping for it.
Oh, and congratulations on the marriage. I saw the photos. You look like a very happy and beautiful couple. Congratulations.
Well, we had a Bitcoin cake. So what more can you ask for? That was our happily ever after.
Nice.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show and hit that notifications button so you never miss any new content. Also, check out our weekly free newsletter at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing should constitute as investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.